Hi everyone, my name is Jordan Cross, and today I'm going to be talking about the different learning styles and how I observe them in a classroom. So to begin, I'm going to define what learning styles are. So they are a consistent pattern of behavior and performance by which an individual approaches educational experiences. Learning styles are influenced by cultural experiences that can come from the home, school, and society. So, this makes it an aspect of socialization, and how a teacher responds to learning styles could potentially affect how a child views educational experiences. And teachers need to understand that students learn differently from one another. Therefore, how they respond or react to a learning style could potentially change how a student views education. So for some background on my observation, I observed in a urban public elementary school. They teach kindergarten through 5th grade. I will refer to the teacher I observed as Miss Smith. She was a kindergarten teacher and she taught both AM and PM classes. Between those AM and PM classes, she had anywhere between 15 and 20 students, and this was her 20th year of teaching. As you can see, there's so many different ways to learn. There's just not one way that everyone is conformed to learn. There are so many different styles, and these are just a few of the most common. Visual learners prefer to use pictures, diagrams, and images to understand the information that is being given to them. Verbal learners like to use words in both speech and written form. Logical and mathematical learners feel it's easier to use logic, reasoning, and sequences to understand the information. Social learners like to work in small groups. Solitary learners like to work alone and they prefer to be by themselves. Combination learners is a learning style that has a combination of two or more of these. Physical learners like to use their hands, body, and sense of touch to help them learn. And musical and auditory learners like to use sounds, music, and sometimes even rhythms to help them learn. So now I'm just going to go over a few ways that Miss Smith implemented these styles. So to begin with visual, Miss Smith used a projection board to go over assignments or directions, books, and any other lesson that she is teaching. And what she did with the projection board was do guided practice. And what this means is she would put the assignment up on the board and do the assignment with the students just watching her. She would show what she expected of them. She would read the instructions. She would do all of the components of the assignment over this projection board before she even gave the students their own assignments. And then once she passed out this assignment, she would still have the projection board available. So if students who were more visual were confused on what was asked of them, they could see it up on this board. And she also used pictures to describe directions. Of course, these are kindergartners, and so they are extremely young, so reading is fairly new to them. So she would use these visuals to describe what was being asked of them on their assignments. So for writing, there was a pencil, cutting, there was scissors, there was a glue stick for gluing, and crayons for coloring, and etc. You get the gist of what that is. But yeah, she would use pictures to help describe directions, to label things so students knew exactly what they were looking for in the classroom. And she also had a sight word wall, so all of the words that the students have learned and are learning would be up on the wall. And if these words had a picture that could help describe them, like apple, there would be an apple on the side of it, or let's say a bottle, there was like a bottle next to it, stuff like that. She had a visual picture alongside with that sight word so the kids could see that and connect both the word and the picture together. For Miss Smith's verbal learners, she had a couple of things to help them. She clearly voiced her directions and frequently. She didn't just say them once and go sit at her desk. She would voice the directions loud and clear, and then she would walk around the classroom, and I would see her ask certain students if they needed to hear the directions again or if they needed any extra help. She was just constantly there and ready to voice the directions or answer any questions the students may have. She would read her stories out loud always. And she also had iPads which were available that had the audiobooks available on them. So if a student was more of a solitary learner, they could go and get one of those iPads and sit on a beanbag chair and listen to the story on the iPad. And she also allowed her students to ask questions for more information. She never made students feel bad for asking a question without raising their hands or telling her that they're confused or if they need to hear the directions again. She was really positive and really supportive, helping her students to speak out and to ask for help if they need it. And a lot of her verbal students really, I could tell, really appreciated this about it because she constantly just walked around and made sure that if they needed help that they were there and really just helped them understand that just because they like the verbal communication and verbal directions does not mean that they're bad students. It just means that they like to have more of a verbal description of what's being asked of them. So how Miss Smith helped her physical learners, she had this amazing math worksheet where it asked math questions, and then at the bottom there were these cars that the students had to cut out and use for the math equations. So for example, if it was 3 plus 3, they would have to count out 3 cars plus an additional 3 more cars, and then they were told to use their pointer finger to touch all of the cars to figure out what 3 plus 3 equals. And so by having that physical touch where they could count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and just having that physical touch, they knew that 3 plus 3 means 6 because they had that physical touch with the cars. So it really helped these physical learners understand that just because they're reading this math equation, that it actually is a physical number that it equals out to. Miss Smith also had this board game available to her students that helped them understand some of their sight words. So some of the sight words that they used were under, over, on, next to, in front, behind, and what this game board looked like was a park, and there was a swing set, a tree, a bush, a bridge, all sorts of things that you would find at a park, a slide, a ladder, and they would have to spin a spinner and whichever word they landed on. So let's say the student landed on under. They would have to take a bear and place it somewhere on the game board where the bear would be underneath it. So for the bridge, they would put the bear underneath the bridge or underneath the tree, and they would have to physically move this bear to the description of the word that they landed on. And what this would do is just help the kids to have a physical sense of what that word meant. It just helped them to physically know exactly what under was, what over was, and on, next to, all of these words. They just had it right there in front of them where they could move that bear to physically see the descriptions of those words. So one thing that Miss Smith did really well was acknowledged that she had both social and solitary learners in her classroom. So Miss Smith allowed some students to work in small collaborative groups, and she also allowed students to work individually. But she had a system to who would work in a group and who wouldn't. For the students who worked in the small groups, they were more of the students who needed more help, took more time to accomplish assignments. They needed their peers to help them remember the directions or what was asked of them. Whereas the students who worked more individually were students who were more advanced for their class. They worked extremely quickly. They preferred their space. They liked their quiet work areas, and they just wanted to get their assignment done so they could have more time to do the things they enjoyed, like playing a board game or reading a book or something like that. But Miss Smith also understood that just because there are social and some solitary students, they still need to have that socializing aspect of the classroom. And so every week she would have an assignment where the students would work in small groups with the teacher, and she would have them work on an assignment together and have them socialize with one another. So they still had So the students who preferred more of the solitary still had those socializing skills. And those are just a few of the examples of how Miss Smith implemented all of these learning styles in her classroom and how she handled these learning styles. But there are also so many other ways that she promotes these learning styles in her classroom. And one of the ways she does this is she walks around the classroom constantly. She's never sitting down at her desk. She always walks around and asks the students if they need help and if they understand what they're doing, if they need, just help with anything. She also encourages all of her learners in her classroom. She once explained when I was observing that everyone blooms and learns at their own pace. That just because you learn something quicker than your peer does not mean you are better than them, and that you should not make them feel bad for learning at their own pace. And I thought that was really important that she taught that, because there are so many different learning styles out there, and she just explained that to the children and told these students that, hey, you may get it, but someone might not yet, and so you need to cheer them on until they understand or until they learn. And I thought that was awesome. She also doesn't tolerate bullying, so she doesn't allow students to be singled out for the way that they learn. She made it very clear that she wants a classroom that just promotes positivity and that she wants her students to cheer on others who are having a hard time. And she just does a really good job of making sure that no one feels left out for how they learn. She also shares everyone's work on the walls. She promotes positivity by doing this. No matter the quality of the work, it is up on the wall, and she cheers them all for accomplishing the work that they've done. She also does a good job of adapting lessons to fit each student's learning style. So Miss Smith is a prime example of why understanding these learning styles is so important. As future educators, we need to know what these learning styles are, and we have to be able to adapt our lessons for all of them. We have to be able to teach every style of learner, and we have to make sure that no one feels left out because they might be more of a visual learner rather than a verbal. Miss Smith did such a good job of making sure all of her students were cared for in their learning environment, and that they had such a positive outlook to school. All right, thank you so much for listening.